generally accepted way to do it now is just to say if it has any kind of evolutionary adaptation that allows it to retain water or to deal with a water scarce environment. So there are a lot of plants that come from the same regions, so they have the same water conditions, but they have different adaptations. And those adaptations are less succulent. So for instance, we have plants that have very small leaves, because smaller leaves means smaller surface area, means less transpiration, so they'll hold on to that water. Those aren't succulent because they don't retain any of the water. So we're talking about water retention. Now the interesting thing is that those water retention techniques can be chemical as well. So all of these plants here do something called crustacean acid metabolism. And you would have heard before probably, it's quite a popular thing to say, and I'm unfortunately going to have to de-romanticize it, that if you keep an aloe vera in your room, it's going to give you oxygen at night, and it's true, but it's an incredibly negligible amount of oxygen. We're talking a couple million particles of oxygen. And within your room, there are billions upon billions. So it's making a drop in the ocean. But that's because of something called crustacean acid metabolism. Every leaf of every plant, every green surface has stoma on it. So on this Chirodopsis, for instance, there are about 4 million stoma per square centimeter. And these are the mouths that it breathes through. Now, most plants are going to have those stoma open during the day so they can breathe, grab that oxygen, release water, engage in transpiration. That goes into Krebs cycle, creates energy for them, locks nitrogen, builds their thick stems. What succulents do is they acidify, so they close those stoma during the day, store the energy that the sunlight provides to them so that they can transpire at night. If they had their stoma open during the day, they would lose all of their water immediately. We keep them closed during the day. At night, they're open, transpire at night. The reason why we have such incredible plants like speckworm, which you've heard of, the miracle plant speckworm, carbon fixing. The reason for that is because of this crustacean acid metabolism, because it uses the carbon Krebs cycle to deal with that. So all of these happen to engage in that. There are a few succulents that are added to the group that don't use that chemical process, but the easiest way to check if something's a succulent is through chemical analysis. And the easiest way to chemically analyze is if you taste the leaf during the morning, it will be sweet. If you taste it at night, it will be sour. You should not try that with most plants, because this is a deadly plant over here. This one will kill you immediately. But if you were able to push through that slight inconvenience of death, you would taste that it's more acidic at night because it's locked all of that energy from the sun as an acid, crustacean acid metabolism. And all of these have developed that, but some of them have developed it independently. So all of these ones here, except for this one, are indigenous to South Africa. Actually, only this one, yeah. And this developed it completely separately to all the others. So it's obviously a very good adaptation if two completely separate population groups could develop the same chemical system. So I'm going to go through each of these and identify why this is a succulent. This one over here, Raffianacme, I think this will be Burkii. Raffianacme Burkii, in nature you only see up to there. So this entire cortex, we call this a cortex or disciform, is under the soil, retaining water. This one's been grown from seed, this one was harvested from nature. Probably about 150 years old. It was seized as a part of someone's estate. And we now take care of it just so I can show you. So if you see one of these, and I'm not going to name the people that are selling them here, if you see one of these, it is from nature. There are no two ways about it. There are guys selling them grown from seed around the corner here. So if you want to invest in a plant, buy the one that was not taken out of the fund. Because there's no way that we're going to continue to live in this wonderful environment if we just destroy the environment. Yeah. So if you see something like this, and it's selling for 150 Rand, not a chance. This is 150 years old. There's no way that it makes sense to sell that at that price. So you're gonna be careful with these because they're sold, and the people that sell them don't tell you. But you can see how much water this could realistically hold on to. Also, once again, that's all you would see above the ground. These leaves are not succulent at all. They're very thin, and from the outside, you would never know that this is succulent. So there's our adaptation for the first one. The second one has a similar adaptation, except it does have slightly succulent leaves. And after this, I would recommend you come and look at this beautiful pot, beautiful flower. This is called a ceropegia. It's a vine, grows up. And ceropegia, the name comes from the Greek kairos and pegios. Kairos meaning wax, pegios meaning like candle. So it's a waxen candelabra thing. So you can see it really looks like it's a dripped wax form. This is a very interesting one, and I actually only have 2 cacti on this table. And I brought 2, I think, interesting ones. This one over here is Lophophora williamsii. It's a very slow-growing plant. This one was given to me by the previous chairperson of the Succulent Society, and she'd had it for at least 60 years. And she's been growing it very hard, so you're not trying to get it to look big. You want it to stay compact. You want it to have that aged look. You're not going for size. So this is a beautiful, unfortunately its flowers just finished its cycle, but it does have a beautiful little pink flower. This is also known as peyote, and it's a very important plant in South America because it carries with it spiritual and entheogenic properties. It contains a chemical called mescaline, which is a serotoninogenic ditryptamine, so it causes you to hallucinate. Then next to it, this is the only cactus that's indigenous to Africa. It's the only thing that grows in Africa that is indigenous and is a cactus. Nothing else that you see in South Africa, if it's a cactus, it's not indigenous. And if it looks like this, it's not a cactus, even though it might have the form of a cactus. This is called Ripsillus bachyfera. This is I've forgotten the name now. I think it would be a dendrophyte, but epiphyte, that's the word. It does not grow in soil. So I've got it in soil here, because you can, but in nature it grows attached to trees. So it's a succulent that grows with exposed roots on a tree in very damp environments, succulent stems, and you're welcome to feel this one. This one's very common, so most of the others I prefer if you don't touch, but if you want to feel this one and see how succulent it is, you can. And it's a bit confused as to how it got to South Africa. Genetically, it's very similar to, we were chatting about this yesterday, very similar to plants from South America. It had to have come from there, but it wasn't brought by humans. It arrived on a piece of driftwood or something like that, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago, and it's now naturalized in South Africa. And we even have varieties here that don't occur in Peru. So we have varieties that have developed over those hundreds of thousands of years. I don't have any of them, they're protected, but we'll get our hands on some of them at some point. Then, we come over here. This is Pegleri, that's it, thank you for helping me. Too many names in my head. Pegleri, one of the most beautiful aloes, one of the best aloes that there is. It forms this beautiful sphere. This is a young one, probably only about 6 years old. I could probably have got it bigger in that time, but I don't treat my plants well. They must suffer if they want to look beautiful. And you can see it's got this nice red coloration, very thick succulent leaves. In winter, those leaves get really puffy, and it looks like it's not going to bounce back. The water comes, they swell up again, it gets this beautiful form. It has a beautiful single stem flower that will reach up to about there, packed with, well, that's called the inflorescence, the flower structure. It's got thousands of flowers on that, and from that you'll get a couple seeds. This has been poached almost to extinction. It used to grow around this area. It would have been on the Highveld. Now the only place you can really see proper populations is in the Magaliesberg. Then we have Aloe bowiei. This is a special one. If you come and look at it, and as I say, I recommend you do, it actually looks quite bulbous at the bottom. Looks like it's got scales like an onion. This was only fairly recently described. In the span of plants, Van Riebeeck was a botanist, so that's where we start our naming journey in the imperial naming tradition. But if you consider this plant just by itself as compared to that, both of them are aloes. This is not in a separate genus, so it's almost as though they are cousins. That's sort of the kind of relation we're talking about here. Then we go over to the mesums. The mesums are just a weird plant group, massive. And by the way, South Africa has about 75% of the succulent plant species on Earth. We are incredibly fortunate to have that. And these two come from the most succulent, dense, and diverse region, which is in the Knansvlakte. Do you have a question? Oh, sorry, no, your shoulder. Sorry. And yeah, so these really just shove as much water into their leaves as possible. But they live in a harrowing environment. They come from, both of these come from the Knansvlakte, which is sort of around Springbok. These big quartz fields, surface temperature of the soil gets between 45 and 55 degrees Celsius. So they have to deal with that intense heat. And they have a variety of adaptations. Firstly, closing their stoma during the day so that they can't release any water. If they get too dry, the lithops will sink below the surface and be protected by a thin layer of soil. So they have a mechanical adaptation as well to avoid the heat. Chirodopsis maintains this incredibly sort of pastel surface, and that reflects an amazing amount of sunlight and heat. If you measure the surface temperature of this plant as opposed to the temperature of the ground around it, it's usually about 10 to 20 degrees Celsius lower, just because it's able to reflect all of that light. The problem then is that if you take these into a place where there's low light, they're not going to be able to get what they need. So you can't really grow these indoors unless you've got really good intense sunlight coming through a window. But what's interesting is you can still kill these with sunlight once they're in a pot. Because when they're in the ground, their roots are sort of up to a meter down. So they've got a lot of resilience that they don't have when we put them in a pot like this. So you have to adapt, and I'll talk about this later for general care. You have to adapt your succulent to the environment you're in, but you have to consider the environment that it originates from. We get over now to euphorbia. I don't know if this is melliformis. I think it's melliformis. No, sorry, this is Velida. And this is a globose euphorbia, so it means that it stays in this nice round shape. It will never become columnar. A lot of the cacti are columnar, they turn into a column. This is globose, stays like this, will get bigger, not much bigger than this. This is an old plant, it's 13, 14 years old. It has persistent peduncles, so it has these structures around it, and that's where the flowers sort of burst from. Each year it will grow a new set of peduncles, there's some green ones here, and they rotate around and that creates a protective shield for the plant. So that's an adaptation for nothing to eat it. That adaptation is not strictly necessary because euphorbias are the most deadly group that we have in South Africa. They are absolutely terrible. If you get the sap on your skin, in your eyes, in your mouth, they're really, there's Euphorbia resinifera, and they've measured the destructive power of it is, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 18 billion times more than capsaicin, which is the thing that makes chilies hot. So we're talking about something that is so far above per teaspoon, you have to kill it. But they are using it for cancer treatment now. The trials are starting, I think, in Stellenbosch, so that's quite cool. And you can see, obviously, this stores all that water, but the other thing that it does, it doesn't have leaves. No leaves means no way to lose that water. So it maintains its water by not creating thin structures that are going to have greater surface area. We then have this Brachysteuma filifolium, which is, I mean, it looks like grass. You walk in the veld, it's impossible to find these things. And this is a particularly beautiful specimen just because of how high it grows. A lot of them stay a little bit lower. And this has a huge bulb under here. Probably about 80% of this pot is taken up by a big bulb that maintains it. And it becomes dormant for 8 months of the year, there's nothing. So trying to find these in the veld to do population studies is really challenging. But it has a gorgeous flower. It's not going to open this weekend, unfortunately. But you can see the flower is starting to open. It's truly beautiful. But you can see that its adaptation is to have that bulb, and secondly, to be dormant. So for half the year, it doesn't need any water. It's not growing. It maintains all that water. It waits for the rain, and then it starts doing its work. So we have mechanical, we have chronological, and we have chemical ways of avoiding loss of water, basically. Then we get to Sansevieria. This is Sansevieria. I only bought it yesterday, so I've got to know the name. Hargesiana. And this family is very interesting, very varied. You would have seen mother-in-law's tongue. That's a popular plant. Grows very well indoors. Will get much taller indoors than in the wild. So if you go to where it comes from, sort of around the Addo area near Port Elizabeth, see they're much shorter, much stockier. You keep them indoors, they get long and stretched out because they're trying to collect the sun. They still look really nice in their form. Most plants don't. This melliformis, if you put it indoors, it'll get skinny and it'll make this horrible little hat. So this you can keep indoors. And this just maintains all the water in its leaves like this, the structure. It has a corm underground. So together with this, it has a corm underground And that's also how it distributes. So it'll grow this form under the ground, pop up a plant, grow and pop up. So these can burst the pots that they're in, so you're going to keep them in a big enough pot because they will just push through the side and try and make their own. Or they'll even grow out the bottom. That happened a few times. Then we have begonia. I've forgotten the name of this one. It was given to me by the Botanical Gardens in Port Elizabeth. But everyone's heard of begonia, often grown as a houseplant, garden plant. This one's indigenous, comes from around KwaZulu-Natal. Got a really beautiful cortex, which you can come and look at later. So it looks like it's just mounted